The city of Zorath was loud, bright, and never still. Towering buildings of shiny metal stretched toward the sky, and the streets were full of creatures from every corner of the galaxy. Strange vehicles zoomed overhead, leaving streaks of light while traders called out selling foods and gadgets that smelled and blinked in every color. But in the middle of all this noise and chaos, a small figure moved carefully along the alleyways. Lyra was a young alien girl with pale, almost translucent skin, and she could not see. Her large, pale eyes only reflected the bright lights around her, but they never captured the world. Instead, she used her other senses, her fingers, her ears, and the tiny vibrations in the ground to know where she was. She could hear the faint hum of electricity in the walls and smell the scents of food, metal, and dust that mixed in the crowded streets. Every day, Lyra walked the same paths, searching for scraps. Not all scraps were equal. Some were soft and edible, like strange fruit that had fallen from market stalls or seeds left behind by careless vendors. Others were hard, shiny, and sharp, useless for eating but useful for trade if she could find someone who wanted them. But mostly she was hungry. Hunger was a constant companion, reminding her to keep moving, keep searching, and never stop. The alleyways she chose were narrow, full of piles of trash and forgotten items. Rusted metal parts, broken tools, and cracked containers littered the ground. Lyra had learned to recognize which piles might hide something she could eat and which were too dangerous to touch. She tapped her walking stick on the ground, listening for hollow sounds, judging by vibration, and sometimes simply following instinct. Today, she found a pile that looked promising. She crouched down, her small hands brushing over broken metal and worn-out plastic. She pulled out a small piece of something that might be food, a soft, pale chunk of what once might have been a plant. Carefully, she sniffed it. Safe. She ate it slowly, savoring the small taste of survival. Then her fingers brushed against something different. Something smooth, cold, and glowing faintly. She froze, curious and cautious. This was not food. It did not smell like metal or decay. It hummed lightly under her touch like it had a life of its own. Lyra turned it over, trying to understand what it was. She had no idea. She had never seen anything like it before. For a long moment, she held it, feeling its strange energy. Then she shrugged. Maybe it was dangerous. Maybe it was useless. With a sigh, she tossed it aside and returned to her small pile of edible scraps. In her world, strange, glowing things were often trouble, and survival came first. Despite the harshness of the city, Lyra never gave up hope. She had survived this long by being careful, clever, and patient. Sometimes she imagined a different life, one where she did not have to search for food in the trash, where she could play and laugh like other children. But those thoughts were fleeting. Hunger reminded her to focus, to move, to survive. As she walked further down the alley, she heard a soft scuffling behind her. Her ears twitched. Many creatures in Zorath's streets were not friendly. She tightened her grip on her stick, ready to defend herself if needed. But it was only a small, stray robot, its wheels squeaking as it moved over the trash. It stopped and beeped, looking at her with blinking lights. Lyra smiled faintly. Even small friends like this robot could make her day a little better. The sun, or what passed for a sun in Zorath's sky, was setting. Lights flickered on across the city, neon signs buzzing and reflecting off the metal buildings. The streets were quieter, but danger could still be around every corner. Lyra needed to find a safe place to sleep, somewhere hidden from predators and gang members who sometimes roamed the alleys at night. She finally found a small nook behind a stack of old crates. It was narrow but safe. She settled down, arranging her few finds for the night. There was a soft piece of cloth she had found earlier, some scraps of edible matter, and a few shiny fragments she hoped might be worth something one day. She hugged them close, comforted by their small presence. Before closing her eyes, her thoughts drifted again to the glowing object she had found. Something inside her whispered curiosity. What if it had been important? But she shook her head. She would think about it tomorrow. Tonight she had to rest. Survival demanded it. As Lyra fell asleep, the city hummed around her. Lights flickered, vehicles zoomed, and life went on. In a world where most people ignored the little and the weak, Lyra survived. Blind, small, and alone, she had made it this far. But unknown to her, the glowing object she had tossed aside was only the beginning of a story that would change her life forever. The night deepened. And Lyra dreamed of a world where even a blind girl could find more than scraps, a world where the forgotten could become something precious. The next morning, the streets of Zorath were alive again. Merchants shouted over one another, selling spices, mechanical parts, and glowing trinkets. The air was thick with the smells of strange foods and burnt metal. Lyra, as always, moved carefully through the narrow alleyways, her fingers brushing over the piles of discarded objects. Each day was a new challenge, and she had to be alert. Today, however, the city felt different. Lyra sensed a new presence. A heavy but calm hum filled the air, and the vibrations on the ground were unusual. Something large and unfamiliar was nearby. She stopped, listening carefully. The sound came closer. Her fingers tapped the walls to feel her surroundings. From around the corner, a tall figure appeared. Lyra could not see him, but she could hear his steps and smell the faint scent of metal and earth, a scent different from anything she had known. He moved slowly, deliberately, and his voice was soft when he spoke. "Hello there," he said, kneeling slightly so he was closer to her height. "I don't want to scare you. My name is Ethan. I'm a friend." Lyra froze. Friends were rare. Most beings in Zorath ignored small scavengers like her, or worse, tried to take their finds. Who are you?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. "I'm a human," he said. "I'm visiting Zorath to learn about your city, and I think you might be very clever." Clever? The word made Lyra tilt her head. Most people only saw her as weak or small. Clever was new. "I collect scraps," she admitted, touching a pile nearby. "I eat what I can. That's all I know." Ethan smiled gently. "I can see that. But some of what you collect, it is not just trash. It could be valuable. Do you want me to show you?" Lyra's hands froze on her pile. She had been tricked before, promises of help that ended in stolen food or broken tools. Her instincts warned her to run, but curiosity and the strange calm in Ethan's voice held her still. "I don't know," she said. "I must eat first. Then I will go." Ethan nodded. He did not insist. "Of course. Take your time." While she ate the soft scraps she had gathered, Ethan sat quietly, observing. He noticed the way she felt each object carefully, how she listened to every sound in the street, and how careful she was to avoid danger. In that moment, he realized that Lyra had skills many others lacked. Her blindness was not weakness. It was a gift that made her sense the world differently. When she finished, Ethan spoke again. "Can I show you something?" Lyra hesitated, but then nodded. She followed him, moving slowly. He guided her through parts of the city she had never explored, streets filled with bright lights and strange machines. He kept his voice calm, describing the world around her. To your left, a market selling glowing fruits. To your right, a small fountain where water runs over metal stones. Listen, hear the hum of the city. Finally, they reached a quiet corner where old discarded objects were piled high. Lyra's fingers brushed over them automatically, searching for food first, as always. But Ethan reached into the pile and picked up a small shining piece of metal. "Do you see this?" he asked. Lyra hesitated. I don't know. It is shiny." "Exactly," Ethan said. "Shiny, yes, but also useful. If you knew how, you could turn it into something amazing, something that others would see as treasure, not trash." Lyra's fingers trembled. Treasure? She had never thought any of her finds could be more than survival tools. I don't understand," she admitted. "That's okay," Ethan said kindly. "I will show you." He began teaching her gently, starting with small things. He explained that broken pieces of metal could be shaped into tools, and that old circuits could power devices if arranged properly. Slowly, carefully, Lyra began to experiment, feeling each piece, learning the way they fit together. At first she struggled. Her hands shook and sometimes objects fell or broke. But Ethan never criticized. He encouraged her. "Try again. You are learning. You are cleverer than you think." Hours passed, but Lyra barely noticed. She was discovering something new. Her senses, her care, and her patience could create more than survival. She could create value. She could make something that mattered. By the time the sun began to set, Lyra held in her hands a small, simple creation made from discarded parts. It was rough and uneven, but to her it was a treasure. Ethan's eyes shone with pride. "You see?" he said softly. "This is the beginning. You can take what others throw away and turn it into something beautiful, something powerful, something that can change your life." Lyra smiled faintly. a feeling she had almost forgotten: hope. For the first time, she imagined a future where she did not just survive, but where she could create, share, and be respected. She still lived in the harsh streets of Zorath, but now she knew something important. The world held treasures if you knew how to see them. As she left Ethan's side that evening, carrying her small creation carefully, Lyra felt a spark inside her that would not fade. She did not know yet how far this path would go, but she knew it was different from anything she had ever imagined. For the first time, the blind alien girl walked not only for survival, but toward something greater. The next morning, Lyra woke early, her small hands already itching to touch and explore. She remembered Ethan's words from yesterday, how he had shown her that even broken or discarded things could become treasures. Her heart raced with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Could she really turn trash into something valuable? Ethan was waiting for her at the edge of the city, near a small pile of discarded items. "Good morning, Lyra," he said with a warm smile. "Are you ready to continue?" Lyra nodded. She had never had a teacher before, and having someone who believed in her felt strange and comforting. "Yes," she said quietly. "Today," Ethan said, "we will start with something simple. Look at this piece of metal." He handed her a small flat shard with a sharp edge. "It may look useless, but it can be shaped into a tool or a piece of art. You only need to imagine its purpose." Lyra ran her fingers over it carefully. She felt the cold smoothness and the jagged edge. She closed her eyes and imagined what it could become. A tiny spark of creativity flickered inside her, something she had never felt while scavenging for food. Ethan guided her hands as she began to bend and shape the metal, feeling how it responded to pressure. At first she was clumsy. The metal resisted and small cuts pricked her fingers. She winced but did not stop. Ethan encouraged her. Slowly, carefully. "Trust your hands. Trust your mind." Hours passed as Lyra experimented with different pieces. Broken wires became tiny circuits. Rusted gears could be cleaned and assembled into moving parts. Even cracked glass could be shaped into decorations. Every small success made her smile, and even the failures taught her something new. During a break, Lyra asked, "Why are you helping me?" Her voice trembled slightly. "You don't even know me." Ethan looked at her thoughtfully. "Because I see potential in you. You have skills and senses most beings don't. And I believe everyone deserves to be seen for what they can do, not just for what they have or how they look." Lyra felt a warmth in her chest. No one had ever said anything like that to her. Most people only looked at her blindness and her small size and assumed she was helpless. But Ethan's words planted a seed of confidence inside her, a seed that would grow faster than she could imagine. By midday, Lyra had created a small device that could move on its own. It was simple, made from gears, metal scraps, and old circuits, but it worked. She laughed in delight as it rolled across the dusty ground, spinning and beeping. Ethan clapped quietly. "You see? You did it," he said. "You didn't just survive, Lyra. You created something new, something valuable." The lesson continued. Ethan showed her how to combine objects in ways she had never thought of. She learned to balance, connect, and strengthen materials. With each attempt, she grew more confident. Her hands, once only skilled in searching for food, now crafted objects with care and purpose. As the sun began to lower, casting long shadows across the city, Ethan handed her a small, glowing fragment. "This one is special. It can be used in many ways, but I want you to decide what it becomes." Lyra closed her eyes, feeling the warmth and vibrations of the piece. She thought of the glowing object she had found in the trash days ago. Could she make something useful or beautiful from it? Slowly, carefully, she worked. Hours seemed to disappear. Her mind was focused and her hands moved with precision. Finally, she held a small glowing ornament. It was simple, but its beauty came from her imagination and effort. Ethan's eyes shone with pride. "You made this, Lyra. You turned something ordinary into something extraordinary. That is the power of vision." Even without sight, Lyra smiled faintly, the first true smile in a long time. She realized that her life could be different. She could do more than just survive. She could create, learn, and be valued for what she could do. The streets of Zorath were still dangerous, but now she had a skill no one could take from her. As they walked back through the bustling streets, Lyra felt a new sense of purpose. She touched the walls, the ground, and the objects around her with renewed curiosity. She noticed details she had missed before. The textures of walls, the hum of machines, the rhythm of footsteps in the streets. Everything was alive with possibilities. When she returned to her small nook for the night, Lyra carefully placed her creations together. Each one told a story of patience, learning, and growth. She realized that even in a world that had seemed harsh and uncaring, she could find ways to thrive. And the thought made her heart lighter than it had ever been. For the first time, Lyra did not think only of survival. She thought of creation. She thought of treasure. And she thought of a future where she could take what others ignored and turn it into something extraordinary. The night came quietly, and the city hummed as usual. But for Lyra, everything had changed. A blind alien girl who had once collected only scraps for food had begun to see a world full of potential. And she knew this was only the beginning. Days passed and Lyra's world began to change. What had once been a life of constant survival now held something new, possibility. Each morning she met Ethan near the city's outskirts where piles of discarded items waited for her hands. With each object she touched, she felt more confident. What had once been trash was now a source of creativity, a tool to shape her future. The other creatures in the city began to notice. Merchants and scavengers who had once ignored the small blind girl now paused as she worked. Lyra could hear whispers as she moved through the market. Look at her hands. She can make something from nothing. Some were curious, others were jealous, but Lyra ignored them. She had learned to focus on her work, not on their opinions. One afternoon, Ethan guided Lyra to a small open square where alien merchants sold their wares. Today, he said, you will show your work to the city. Lyra's fingers trembled. She had never shown her creations to anyone outside Ethan. What if they laughed? What if they stole her ideas? But Ethan's voice was calm and encouraging. Trust yourself. You have learned much. Now others will see what you can do. She set her small creations on a worn cloth. Tiny devices, moving ornaments, and glowing fragments sat neatly, waiting to be discovered. Her hands lingered over them, almost afraid to let go. Slowly, a crowd gathered. Some aliens bent low to inspect her work. Others whispered in admiration. One older merchant leaned down and touched a small gear device she had assembled. I have never seen anything like this, he said. You turned old scraps into something alive. Lyra's heart swelled. She had never heard words like this before. She smiled faintly, feeling a warmth she had never known. It was more than pride. It was validation, proof that she could do more than survive. Not everyone was happy. A group of scavengers who had always fought over scraps approached, their voices sharp. Who taught you to make these things? One demanded. You have no right to this space. Lyra stepped back, clutching a small device close to her chest. She felt fear rise, but then she remembered Ethan's lessons. Use your mind, not your strength. Carefully, she explained, I found these items and I made them. They are mine. I only ask you to respect my work. The scavengers laughed at first, but then they paused. They saw the confidence in her voice, the care in her hands, and the truth in her words. Slowly, they stepped back. Lyra realized that courage was more powerful than anger or violence. By the end of the day, many of the city's citizens had bought small items from her. A glowing fragment here, a tiny moving ornament there. Some even offered scraps for her to transform. Lyra realized she had not only created objects, she had created opportunity. That evening, she returned to her nook, tired but happy. Her small collection of creations had grown, and she carefully organized each piece. She touched each one, remembering the hours she had spent shaping, bending, and assembling. Each object was more than metal and circuits. It was proof that she could do something extraordinary. Over the next few weeks, Lyra's reputation spread. Merchants brought her old scraps. Aliens whispered about the blind girl who could turn trash into treasure. Even humans visiting the city came to see her work. She felt pride and excitement, but also a new responsibility. People trusted her, and she wanted to continue to create, to help others see the value in what was forgotten. Ethan watched her quietly one afternoon as she shaped a broken gear into a delicate ornament. You've grown so much, he said softly. You are no longer just a survivor. You are a creator, a teacher, a treasure in this city. Lyra blushed. She had never thought of herself as a teacher, or as someone valuable. Yet Ethan was right. Her hands, once only used to gather scraps for food, now brought beauty and usefulness to the city. She had changed, and so had the way others saw her. That night, as the city lights flickered and the streets grew quiet, Lyra sat by her small pile of creations. She thought of her journey, the fear, the hunger, the loneliness, and now the hope, the skills, and the respect she had earned. A small smile formed on her lips. She realized that even a blind girl could shape the world around her if she trusted her hands, her mind, and the guidance of someone who believed in her. For the first time, Lyra dreamed not only of surviving but of thriving. She imagined a future where she could teach others, create more treasures, and perhaps even change the lives of other struggling beings in the city. The streets of Zorath were still crowded and noisy, still dangerous, but they were full of opportunity, and she was ready to take it. As the stars began to twinkle in the sky above the towering buildings, Lyra felt a sense of peace and pride she had never known. She had transformed her world, not just through her hands, but through her courage, determination, and belief in possibility. The blind alien girl who had once scavenged only for food had begun to shine, not because she could see, but because she had learned to see potential everywhere. The city of Zorath had changed for Lyra, and she had changed with it. The blind alien girl who had once scoured trash piles for food now walked the streets with purpose. Each step carried confidence, and each touch of an object held promise. Her hands, trained by hours of practice and guided by Ethan's wisdom, could see what her eyes could not. Lyra's small shop had become a familiar sight in the market square. A simple cloth covered a low table displaying her creations, tiny machines, ornaments, and glowing fragments, all made from discarded items. Aliens and humans alike came to visit, curious and impressed. Some brought scraps for her to transform, hoping to see the magic she could create. Others simply admired her skill. One morning, as Lyra carefully arranged a row of glowing devices, a group of young aliens approached. They were smaller, younger than Lyra had been when she first scavenged, and their eyes were full of curiosity and hunger. They peered at her work and whispered to each other. "Can you teach us?" one asked timidly. Lyra felt a spark of recognition. She remembered how hard it had been to survive alone, how much she had learned from Ethan, and how she had struggled to believe in her own skill. Now she could offer guidance to others. "Yes," she said softly, smiling. "I can show you how to turn what seems useless into something valuable. But you must be patient, careful, and kind with your hands." The young aliens nodded eagerly. Lyra led them to a quiet corner behind her shop, where scraps and broken pieces awaited. She taught them to feel, to listen, and to imagine. At first they fumbled, dropping pieces and bending them wrong. Lyra showed them again, guiding their hands gently. Slowly they began to create small treasures. Ethan watched from a distance, pride shining in his eyes. He had believed in Lyra when no one else had, and now she was doing the same for others. "You've come so far," he said softly. "Not just in skill, but in heart." Lyra blushed slightly, but her hands never stopped moving. She felt alive in a way she had never known. Helping others gave her purpose beyond her own survival. She was no longer just the blind girl who collected trash. She was a teacher, a creator, and a symbol of hope. The city began to recognize her too. Merchants invited her to display her work in larger markets. Visitors from distant places came to see the treasure girl, as she had come to be called. Some offered resources, materials, and tools she had never imagined using. Lyra handled it all with quiet determination, careful to honor her beginnings and the lessons she had learned from discarded objects. One evening, as the twin suns of Zorath set and the sky turned soft shades of pink and purple, Lyra walked through the bustling streets. She could feel the energy of the city under her feet, the hum of machines and the chatter of citizens. She touched walls, railings, and objects along her path, noticing details she had never observed before. Everything was alive, full of possibility, and she had learned to see it all. A group of scavengers who had once challenged her approached with wary expressions. They had watched her grow from a timid survivor to a confident creator. This time they bowed slightly in respect. Lyra nodded politely, feeling no fear. She had proven that intelligence, creativity, and courage mattered more than size or strength. Back at her shop, Lyra placed the final touches on a small moving device she had been crafting for a human visitor. The device whirred and beeped, and the young aliens clapped in delight. Lyra laughed softly. Her life had changed completely, from searching for scraps to creating joy, teaching others, and inspiring her city. That night, Lyra sat quietly with Ethan by her side. She touched each creation, remembering her journey. The cold alleys, the hunger, the fear, and the discovery of the glowing object she had once tossed aside. It seemed like a lifetime ago. Do you see now? Ethan asked. Even in a world that can seem harsh and uncaring, you can make a difference. You have changed your life and the lives of others. Lyra smiled. I see. And it feels good. I never thought I could do more than survive. But now I know I can create, teach, and help. I can turn the forgotten into something treasured. Ethan nodded. And this is only the beginning. Imagine how many others you can help, how much you can change, not just here but in the wider galaxy. Lyra closed her eyes and felt the warmth of possibility around her. She remembered the fear of being small, weak, and blind, and now she felt powerful, not because of sight or strength but because of creativity, intelligence, and heart. The city hummed with life outside her shop, full of opportunity and promise. Lyra's hands rested on a glowing device and she felt a deep sense of peace. She had transformed not only her own life, but the lives of others. She had become more than a survivor. She had become a creator, a teacher, and a beacon of hope in Zorath's crowded streets. And as she drifted to sleep that night, surrounded by her creations and the soft hum of the city, Lyra dreamed of a future full of possibilities. A future where the overlooked could become treasures, and the small, the weak, and the forgotten could rise. She had begun her journey with scraps and hunger, but she would continue with knowledge, courage, and heart. The blind alien girl had found her treasure, not just in objects but in life itself.